Wesley Rourke was invisible until he wasn't. Once a quiet city engineer with keys to the underworld of New York's infrastructure, he would become the architect of terror in AOC's district, place already fraying at the edges. And while Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez captured national headlines, Rourke worked in the shadows, orchestrating a series of disappearances that would expose not just a killer, but the collapse of a system no one wanted to admit was failing. For years, New York's 14th Congressional District existed like a living mural, colorful, loud, and full of motion, stretching across parts of the Bronx and Queens. It was a place where bodegas sat shoulder to shoulder with laundromats, and where you could hear 5 languages on one street corner. The district had always known struggle working-class families juggling 2 jobs, immigrant communities navigating the system, schools with more heart than funding, but it was proud. Proud of its roots, its culture, and its voice. That voice grew louder when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected to Congress. Too many. She symbolized change, hope, and a future that finally included them. In the early months of her term, local optimism was high. People showed up at town halls with notepads full of questions and dreams. Volunteer groups pushed to clean up playgrounds, paint murals, start community gardens. News cameras flocked to the district. Supporters posted selfies at events, proud to be from AOC's neighborhood. The national spotlight felt like progress, even as citywide crime began to fluctuate. Residents believed their neighborhoods would be different, protected by representation that claimed to understand their pain. Then, little things began to happen, things that were easy to ignore. A car vandalized on an unusually quiet block, a series of break-ins at corner stores. Police reports were filed but quickly closed. There wasn't enough evidence. People chalked it up to a random spike, a side effect of life in a big city. But then the fire started. It began with one car, torched in the dead of night beneath an overpass on the Whitestone Expressway. The fire was blamed on faulty wiring. Then 2 more cars burned on opposite sides of the district the next week. Both fires shared strange similarities, sex-alert residue, broken windows, burn patterns, suggesting deliberate placement. Still, no suspects, no arrests, just soot and twisted metal, left for city workers to clear. Some residents began sharing theories on neighborhood forums, accusing gangs, protesting the lack of response, tagging their council members, tagging AOC. But there were no clear answers, no statements, just a few brief police bulletins saying investigations were ongoing. Behind the scenes, patrols were stretched thin. Officers were being shifted to other boroughs. Rumors circulated that precincts were understaffed or under pressure to avoid high-profile incidents in the district. It was just noise at first. Background tension. Then came the whispers of something darker. A tenant in a high-rise near Pelham Parkway claimed she heard screaming one night that cut off too suddenly. A subway operator reported seeing a man pull someone into a service tunnel, but security footage was inconclusive. By the time police arrived, the tunnel was empty. In each case, there were no formal charges, no victims, just stories that made neighbors lock their doors a little earlier and walk a little faster. What no one realized was that the crime wave wasn't coming, it had already begun. Hidden just beneath the surface, the district was being pulled into a spiral of silence, confusion, and fear. A storm was building, and almost no one was watching. The disappearances began like scattered drops before a storm. At first they didn't seem connected. Isolated cases, buried in the flow of a city that never stops. The first to vanish was a middle school teacher from Jackson Heights. She had stayed late to grade papers and never made it home. Her car was found the next morning, engine cold, doors locked, parked just 2 blocks from her apartment. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, and no one could explain why a woman with a routine life simply vanished. A week later, a well-known deli owner in Pelham Bay closed his store early one evening, telling a regular customer he was feeling unwell. That was the last time anyone saw him. His family reported him missing the next morning. The cash register was untouched, no security footage showed anything unusual, and his phone was discovered days later in a storm drain 5 miles away. It was dead, wiped clean. Soon after, a 16-year-old student disappeared on her usual walk home from school in Parkchester. She was seen on a nearby bodega's camera buying a soda and smiling, but she never arrived. Her mother called friends, teachers, hospitals. Her backpack was found later near the Bronx River, contents scattered, wallet still inside. No one could explain it. No known enemies, no gang ties, no reasons, just a growing sense of dread. By the end of the second month, 4 more people were missing. An MTA janitor, a part-time Uber driver, a retired veteran, and a bakery assistant. None of them knew each other. They lived in different neighborhoods, came from different backgrounds, but all had one thing in common. They vanished without a trace inside the same congressional district. Each case opened with urgency, then cooled without resolution. Detectives came and went. The media gave brief attention, and then silence. Residents began to notice patterns the authorities hadn't. Online forums filled with speculation. One thread laid out a map of the disappearances, connecting them along old infrastructure lines, abandoned subway paths, closed-off tunnels, defunct maintenance shafts. The theory was dismissed as amateur detective work, but it spread fast. People wanted answers, and official channels weren't giving them. Tensions mounted. Local news stations started reporting on the district's rising unease. Community leaders called for more resources, more patrols, more accountability. At the center of the storm was a growing feeling of betrayal. The district's representative, once hailed as a voice for the people, was increasingly described as absent. Press requests went unanswered. Public events were quiet. For many residents, it felt like leadership had turned away when they needed it most. The phrase "she has done nothing" started appearing on posters, graffiti, even church signs. It wasn't just about one person. It was about the system, the sense that no one was protecting them, that they had been left to fend for themselves as something sinister moved through their streets. And while the community debated theories and pointed fingers, the truth was buried somewhere deeper, just waiting to be found. The discovery was accidental, but it changed everything. 2 city maintenance workers were inspecting a collapsed tunnel beneath Soundview Avenue. Heavy rains had exposed weaknesses in the decades-old structure, and their job was simple: assess the damage, report it, and leave. But when they descended into the tunnel and moved deeper into the unlit corridor, the air turned cold and still. The farther they went, the more the silence pressed against them. Then they found the plastic. Thick industrial sheeting, stained and torn, covered 3 human bodies, partially buried beneath broken concrete. The smell was unmistakable, and the scene was unlike anything they had ever seen. Emergency services sealed off the area. Forensics teams worked for hours under harsh lights, documenting every detail. The victims were confirmed as 3 of the missing individuals: the Jackson Heights teacher, the Pelham Bay deli owner, and the Parkchester student. Each body had been wrapped tightly, bound in a methodical way, suggesting deliberate care rather than panic. The autopsies revealed they had died days after vanishing, likely held somewhere before being killed. No signs of sexual assault, no obvious motive, but the manner of death was chilling. Each victim had been suffocated and injected with a sedative beforehand. Whoever did this wanted them quiet, compliant, and erased. The location itself told a story. The tunnel wasn't accessible to the public, not even well known to most city workers. It had been sealed for years and was missing from updated municipal maps. Someone knew it existed. Someone had gone through effort to access it. That narrowed the pool of suspects, dramatically pointing to a person with specialized knowledge of the city's underbelly. The media exploded with the news. For the first time, the district's string of disappearances was publicly declared a homicide investigation. Residents who had been speculating for months now felt vindicated, but the validation came with horror. The reality was worse than they imagined. This wasn't a case of runaway teens or random muggings. This was targeted killing. More bodies followed. Within a week of the tunnel discovery, 3 additional victims were found in a sealed subway maintenance room near Astoria. The location was cleaner, more deliberate, as if staged. Forensics matched the pattern: same bindings, same sedatives, same execution. The room had been accessed with a city-issued keycard that had been deactivated months earlier. The killer wasn't just smart, it once belonged to the system. Authorities scrambled to connect clues. Data analysts were brought in. The FBI offered assistance. Still, there was no suspect, no clear trail, only overlapping layers of city bureaucracy and outdated infrastructure. Surveillance footage offered nothing. Public pressure reached a boiling point. Community meetings grew hostile. Residents demanded more from the city, from the police, from AOC herself, whose office had remained largely silent since the crisis began. The discovery of the tunnel graves confirmed what many feared. This was indeed just a district with a crime problem. It was a district under siege by something invisible, methodical, and terrifying. The killer moved like a ghost, and now the entire city knew it. Fear spread faster than facts. In the weeks following the discovery of the bodies, the district began to unravel. The initial shock morphed into something deeper, constant, pulsing anxiety that seeped into every corner of daily life. Parents stopped letting their children walk to school alone. Shop owners installed new locks, bars, and motion sensors. Restaurants emptied after sundown. Kind of invisible curfew took hold. The city hadn't ordered it, the people had. The police presence increased, but not enough to meet demand. Officers patrolled in pairs, then in groups. Temporary surveillance towers appeared in high-traffic zones. Helicopters buzzed overhead on restless nights. But even with increased patrols, the numbers told a disturbing story. Crime was rising fast. Within a single month, reports of theft, vandalism, and assault more than doubled. Carjackings occurred on residential streets in broad daylight. A string of home invasions struck neighborhoods that had once been considered quiet and safe. Shopkeepers reported being threatened by masked figures demanding protection money. At least 2 of them refused. Both were beaten within 48 hours. One ended up in intensive care. Fear wasn't just personal anymore, it was organized. The district was splintering into zones of control. In some areas, loosely formed vigilante groups began taking matters into their own hands. Armed with bats, dogs, and walkie-talkies, they patrolled blocks at night, claiming to offer community protection. But not everyone trusted them. There were rumors of confrontations, of mistaken identities, of innocent people being followed, harassed, even assaulted in the name of justice. In other parts of the district, criminal organizations filled the vacuum of power. Gangs once pushed to the margins found themselves emboldened. They moved openly, tagged territory, and offered security to residents and businesses in exchange for silence and cooperation. Many agreed, some out of desperation, others out of fear. The line between neighbor and threat blurred beyond recognition. The media latched onto the chaos. Headlines shouted of a 70% surge in crime. News vans lined the sidewalks. National networks turned the district into a symbol of urban collapse. Pundits argued over causes, policing, politics. Social media boiled over with theories, blame, and outrage. AOC's name trended again and again. Protesters gathered outside her office. They held up posters with the same 4 words scrawled across them in black marker. She has done nothing. The pressure mounted on all sides. City officials scrambled to respond, releasing public statements filled with promises and platitudes. A new task force was formed. Another budget was requested. But to the people living inside the fear, it felt like too little too late. The killer, now widely believed to be a former insider with technical knowledge, had not struck again, not publicly. But the violence hadn't stopped. It had multiplied. Whether the murderer had inspired others, or simply exposed how fragile the district's safety net really was, the result was the same. Lawlessness had taken root, and the system meant to stop it was drowning in red tape, public outrage, and internal confusion. The storm wasn't over, it was accelerating. The breakthrough came not through high-tech surveillance or expert profiling, but from a simple mistake. A digital forensics analyst combing through outdated municipal access logs found something strange. An encrypted data ping from a keycard that had been deactivated nearly a year earlier. The signal had originated from an unused maintenance terminal in East Elmhurst, appeared to have been active intermittently for months. It should have gone unnoticed, buried under system updates and bureaucratic neglect. But this analyst had been assigned to search everything, and she did. A quiet investigation followed. The terminal was traced to a former Department of Environmental Protection employee named Wesley Rourke. Once a senior infrastructure engineer, he had been fired after a series of internal complaints and erratic behavior. His name had appeared nowhere in the active investigation, not because he was a criminal genius, But because the system had deleted his clearance without following up on his digital footprints, his knowledge of the district's inner workings had been vast tunnels, forgotten access points, outdated maintenance maps. Now, it all made sense. Authorities moved quickly. A warrant was issued. Surveillance began. They located him living in a crumbling warehouse converted into a personal bunker on the fringe of the district. He had rigged the building with traps and makeshift security systems, but when agents moved in, he offered no resistance. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by monitors, maps, and files, as if waiting to be caught. What they found inside defied explanation. Pinned to the walls were photos of the victims, news clippings, and handwritten timelines. There were detailed charts marking the decay of the district crime statistics, budget shifts, population data, even speeches from local politicians. He had built a manifesto around the belief that the district had been abandoned, not by fate, but by design. He blamed the leadership, especially AOC, claiming that her rise had brought attention, but no real action. He said he had wanted to show what happened when people stopped paying attention. His crimes were framed not as revenge, but as performance. A grotesque warning. Among the evidence was a list more names, more potential targets, some of whom were already missing. Investigators believed he wasn't finished. He had simply paused. The bodies had created noise and he was listening, but others had been listening too. They were inspired, some enraged, others emboldened. Wesley Rourke had sparked something larger than himself. His arrest was publicized immediately. Officials held press conferences. The mayor made statements. The police claimed a major victory. AOC broke her silence with a carefully worded post, acknowledging the loss, pledging reform, and thanking law enforcement. But for many in the district, the damage had been done. The crime surge didn't end with his capture. The fear didn't fade overnight. Rourke had exposed more than just his own madness. He had revealed how vulnerable the district truly was, how easily systems could be manipulated, how quickly chaos could replace order, and how silence from leadership could echo louder than any scream. The people of the 14th were left with scars, visible and invisible, and one question hung in the air long after the headlines faded. Would anyone finally listen now, or was this just the beginning of something worse?